Hello, everybody! It is Rocco, you boy, coming at you once again with another Age of Sigmar video. That's right, the channel is still going strong, even though I've been guest hosting over at the Always Strikes last podcast, and I'm back here to answer another viewer question. This one specifically is what's up with all the tournament results and everyone's saying, hey man, manifestations are mandatory, manifestations are mandatory. Why aren't they just talking about the endless spells that are there? I am here to go and talk about this. So, first off, this was an old fluff piece, older, for the Warhammer community website. We got my notes here. Gotta go make sure I get the right data for you. And what they did, what Games Workshop did for 4th edition, is they took the Endless Spells and the Incarnate of Gur, the Kronspine, which I've gotten over being in the game a little bit. I'll get over it. I won't. I might, who knows. Either way, it's here, and they are broken up into small chunks of endless spells, so that if you did what I did, and you bought a few that suited your army and converted them or did whatever, and didn't buy the whole big set, well, now you're probably going to need the set. And in army selection, again, where this would actually come into play here, you would have your spell lore for your army, your prayer lore if it's applicable, spell lore if it's applicable, and then some kind of manifestation lore. This allows armies with priests to still have all their endless prayers, but you still roll to banish them as if they were an endless spell. And again, they're brought up into chunks that are a bit more manageable. The first one being all the stuff from the Forbidden Power box. If we remember the narrative campaign, where Catacross in the Ossiarch Bone Reapers came from at the end of that. And this has the Horror Gas, the Shards of Valangar, Launchon the Soul Seeker, the lovely little boatman, the Bringy Dingy, as it has been nicknamed in previous editions, and the Soul Scream Bridge. The bridge still teleports units. The boat still teleports a hero, I believe. It also fights, which is nice. That's the other thing with this. It does an infantry wizard hero. The manifestations now are a bit more manifested into the realms, by which to say a lot of them have stats, some of them have movement ranges, they can charge into combat and fight, which has been leading to not gotcha moments, but certain manifestation lores are more powerful than others based on what they can do. Alright, so we've got the Forbidden Power stuff. We've got what has swiftly become the MVP, the Morbid Conjuration spell lore, which is funny because for like the Tacoma Open, where lists were due day of the event, in a field of, I believe it was 86 players, I think it was something like ridiculous, like 70 of the players just took this just because it seemed like it was the best, and so far they seem correct. Again, these manifestations are not worth points to your army currently, as of this video, so it's based on like what does the War Scroll do. Now what is so special about this Morbid Conjuration here? We've got the Malevolent Maelstrom, which, bottom left here, has an 8-inch move, 6 health, it gets banished on a 7+, it has a 6-up save, a 6-up ward, it can fight in melee, it's actually hit 2d6 attacks, hit on 2s, wound on 3s, no rend 1 damage. Crit hits get you 2 hits for every roll of a 6, you roll for the hit roll, and it's got its ability to blow up still. It's nice. We've got the Suffocating Gravetide, which is a big piece that just takes up a lot of space. And if this manifestation moves in its movement characteristic of 12, it can pass through models. When you pick an enemy unit, this manifestation passes across, roll the dice for each model in the target unit on a 5-up, inflict 1 mortal damage. It's a horde clearing piece, which is great. Movement 12, banishment 7. Some of these even have rules where, like, if you roll successfully to banish it, it just takes 6 damage. This is not one of those. But one of those would be, I believe, the Gravetide. Not the Gravetide. Dope. We just did the Gravetide. The Purple Sun. I'm leaving that in there. You need to go and see this and hear this too. It says, Wild Form. Every time it is targeted by a banished manifestation, allocate 6 damage points to it. Ward rolls cannot be made. But it still subtracts save rolls from enemy units, specifically just enemies now, not all units near it, within 3. And given form, it can pass through models during its normal move in the movement phase, pick up to 3 enemy units it passed through, roll a d3 for each target, on a 2-up inflict that much mortal damage. And the thing about this that is so scary is save stacking isn't as easy as it was in 3rd edition, and a lot of attacks, especially shooting, are down to 1 rend to try to make shooting weaker. And you also run into things where units now, because the combat ranges are 3 inches, that you're going to get an enormous amount of attacks, say, from a bunch of clan rats, but they don't really have the rend to back that up, the volume of dice. And the Purple Sun is just amazing for that. But the piece de resistance is the Soul Snare Shackles. They've got no movement range. You just plop them down when you summon them. Thing is, in any hero phase, you can declare, for each part of this manifestation, you can pick an enemy unit within 3 inches of that to be the target. You cannot pick the same unit to be the target of this ability more than once per turn. Roll a d3. On a 2-up, inflict that amount of mortal damage equal to the roll, and subtract a number of inches equal to the roll from the target's movement characteristic for the rest of the turn. In a game of any Warhammer game, everything Games Workshop designs, movement is key. Being able to get your power pieces, your hammers, which, if you've been a fan of the show, are your damage units, especially if they're melee units, into combat. Stopping them from being able to move an extra 3 inches, that hurts. That hurts. When the standard movement on a human is 5 inches on foot, that frickin' hurts. And you can really mess up your opponent's positioning, being able to get to objectives to stand on them, being able to charge, get in range to shoot you, get in range to score battle tactics. Soul Snare Shackles is just, say that 3 times fast. Soul Snare Shackles, Soul Snare Shackles, Soul Snare Shackles is a scary, so once for each base in there, is a scary endless spell. And that's why this has been so popular, when everything has the same opportunity cost of, well, you just pick a manifestation lore. Morbid Conjuration's been pretty good for it. But next we've got the Aether Wrought Machineries, which I think has some really good play, and specifically the Quicksilver Swords. They do a lot of good damage, and they still ignore ward saves, which are now seemingly more important than ever, even though a lot of them aren't as good as they were. But you pay a premium price for them now, and they're just really good. Cog still has a lot of play here with either giving an aura of -1 to hit, or I believe it's reroll charges. We've got Primal Energy with the Gnashing Jaws being as strong as ever. Life Swarm bringing models back. Burning Head's really cool. An interesting one in the I'm going to go Twilight Sorceries here. Geminid stops people from being able to do command abilities, which is great because, well, they're really impactful. To be able to stop a unit from countercharging is humongous. But it also, in a world where there's so few command points to start with, being able to stop the one time they really need the command to go off because they got hit by a Geminid, huge. A change to Spell Portal is that enemy wizards can unbind through the Spell Portal as you can cast through it. It is a 2-way Spell Portal after all. So that's a slight nerf to it, as it was before. And the Palisade is still good to block line of sight to things. Now, we finally come on to the last manifestation lore of the Kronspine Incarnate, where it is a melee beatstick that is really good at beating up these other manifestations. Right? It's not as good as it was. It's not the monster starts on the table and does all the things. No. What the Kronspine does is it's got a 10-inch move, 12 health, it gets banished on an 8 up. It has the ability to just take damage instead of actually being banished. It's got a 4 up save, a 6 up ward, and when it dies, you just summon it back on an 8. Now, the thing about the Kronspine, compared to all the other stuff, as much as Morbid Conjuration is great, you generally need 2 to 3 casts to get what you want out of these different manifestations that are all these former endless spells, right? You need 2 to 3 casts, maybe a few more if you also like your own spell lore that you get. If you do not have that, if you have 1 to 2 casts, and especially if your local meta is filled with people throwing purple suns and shackles and geminids at you everywhere, let alone those armies that have their own endless spells and conjurations and manifestations and lions and tigers and bears, oh my, you take a Kronspine and you just let it eat all of the other manifestations. And when it dies, you know they only have 1 unbind to stop, but if you can get it back out again, you are just going to be such a pain in the backside right now. Especially because we can spend a command point, right, to have a wizard or priest chant or cast a spell in our opponent's hero phase. Setting up a Kronspine or any of these endless spells to deny space. I'm talking the Palisade. I'm talking about even setting up a spell portal so you can get unbinds through later. I'm talking about the ones that have movement also move in your turn. There's some weird things with that, but setting up Geminids so that in your turn they can go and smack what you need to have smacked. The Jaws, because you know they've got the 3d6 movement. You want your opponent to move up closer to the objectives in the middle of the board, so you cast this in their turn, so that on your turn it just goes off. Again, denying space with the shackles to be like, cool, you know they need to go and land a charge to be able to contest an objective or do something. You just, because you can't end movement on top of their bases, these manifestations have been playing a major role in the tournament scene and just Age of Sigmar 4th edition in general. And I don't know how much I like that, in the sense that we're back to the problem at the end of 3rd where magic armies are just going to be that much better because they can do this stuff easier. A lot of the pluses to Unbind have been taken out throughout the game. So you're more likely going to be hit by a spell. And these are just really good to use. You know, I don't know how Games Workshop is going to balance these. Because again, all of these little packs are free. You just take one of them. That's the opportunity cost, right? And they'd have to do something that Games Workshop has been very... they've loathed to do this, is work and tinker with War Scrolls. Now, we're still in the index phase of Age of Sigmar 4th edition. You know, everyone sees each other's rules and everything's out there and everything's free for that, which I really like so much. I like being able to go and just float through the different armies. Like, oh, hey, I've got this, I've got that. You know, and me owning different armies means I don't have to spend a bunch of money just on the books to stay relevant for a year and a half. Just because the fancy hits me, oh, I want to play Tzeentch today. Oh, I want my Deepkin. Oh, why don't I bring out cities? You know, this makes me want to go and list build and think of ways to go. Like, I got 20 hammerers coming to me. I've never wanted to play a dwarf besides my man Ugni before. who's my rune lord. And now all of a sudden, because of all these things, I get to go and list build and buy models and hobby and go crazy. But, one thing that you need if your army can cast them is something from this manifestation lore, just because it's free. If you have a lot of casts, maybe the spell portal to shoot out something is your bag. Stopping your opponent from having their really cool command abilities is great. Gnashing Jaws still does a lot of damage. Life Swarm's good for healing and recursion. You're dealing with a bunch of people with ward saves. Screw them up with Quicksilver Swords. The Pendulum's always good damage. Cogs are nice. And this has been just awesome. Probably because there's also 4 in here. But, getting extra rend for your weapons from the Purple Sun. Messing up people's movement with the shackles from a few different ways, intentional or not. Having a Horde Clearer and the Gravetide if you're an elite army. And the Maelstrom just blowing up to do consistent damage is really nice. And if you don't have enough casts, you just go take this Kron's Bind and just let it loose and devour every one of these manifestations and also beat up on other people. It's great at killing monsters. It is a good fighting piece. Does it die a lot quicker than it did in 3rd edition? Yes. Is that a good thing because of the way the game changed for 4th? Yes. So please, manifestations were the former endless spells and the Incarnate got slapped in there. They're really good. If you're like me and you only have 1 or 2 of each thing, like I've got Geminids, I own Burning Head, Quicksilver Swords, I'm getting the Pendulum, and I have Cog somewhere. So this might be where I go. I've got the Stormcast ones. I've got the Maelstrom, I'm getting the Purple Sun and the Gravetide. I have Shackles. But, if your army doesn't have the casts to take advantage of this, just find this guy. There's Games Workshop selling it solo now without the terrain, so it's cheaper. You can, I said Games Workshop selling something that's cheaper. Weird. There's ways to 3D print this to go and model it to fit your army to be like some kind of big sea snake crazy thing if you're Deepkin, or a big chicken if you're Zinch. I don't know, but you need something. You need to take a manifestation lore. Everybody else is. This is an arms race. In Warhammer, it happens. And I want you, dear viewer, you gotta follow me, camera guy. I want you, dear viewer, to be able to play your games and have fun. And one of the things to do this, yes, it will increase the cost of getting into the game if you're playing the full Age of Sigmar game. If not, you want to build up to it slowly. Honestly, this is probably one of the best things they have to promote their Spearhead game mode, to be the, you go in with less models, it's balanced out of the box, and you don't need to worry about this stuff. But if you want to be a tournament player, as we get hundreds of thousands of them coming through the channel, hopefully more, you're going to want a manifestation lore. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Everybody else as well. Be nice, roll some dice, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.